And just like I told everybody else, I'm really grateful that you have allowed me to come in here and do this. Thank you for your time. More importantly, thank you for your sacrifice for our community and your bravery.
Well, thank you.
Really
Appreciate that.
appreciate
We,
it.
we appreciate what you've done more than you could possibly know. It's always great when people do that stuff.
Excellent. So we'll just start super basic. What is your name? Can you introduce yourself? What's your name? How long have you been here? Do you have a family? That sort of stuff.
Sure. So my name's Jerry Holt. I'm the fire chief here. I was the first paid person hired in Urbandale. I was hired in 1998, so I've been the fire chief since 1998. Going February next year will be 26 years. I have a family. I have two daughters and obviously a wife. Both my daughters have significant others, and so I have three grandchildren, which are the light of my life. And I'm reaching the end of my career, so next year will probably be my last year, and I'll be retiring from Urbandale. So came here by way of Alabama. I was a training officer in a small department in Alabama. Saw the job here and applied. Next thing I know, I'm in Urbandale. And really, quite honestly, my plan was to be here for 5 years and then move on to something bigger and something better. I fell in love with Urbandale, fell in love with Iowa, and I mean, it's just a great place to be. And I said, well, okay, I'll stay here and then I'll retire. Then I'll go back home down south where I'm from. And but I never anticipated the grandchildren part of the equation. So now that I have grandchildren, we're not going anywhere. We're going to be here because that's where our grandkids are and our kids are, and there's no way that I'm leaving that. I never thought about that part of it when I moved up here.
Sure, we have to adapt,
Yep,
right?
no
We
doubt.
adapt to what life gives us.
Absolutely.
So, did you always want to be a firefighter?
You know, I probably like most kids wanted to be something to help people. I at one time wanted to be a game warden, then a state trooper, and then in the '70s, as a kid, the show Emergency came on. I don't know if you've ever seen that show. It's on nightly now in reruns, and I still watch it. That's what made me want to get into the fire service. And I wasn't so much in love with fighting fire. That was really not my interest. My interest was being a paramedic and practicing medicine in the field and getting to do some things. And then once I got hired at the fire department, I went to school to be an EMT, and then I got hired at the fire department, and they sent me to paramedic school. So that was a neat way to achieve a goal that I wanted to do. And during that time, I fell in love with the fire department. I'm like, oh my gosh, from whether it's fighting fire or taking care of somebody on the side of the road in a bad accident, whatever it may be, it was everything that I wanted it to be. I mean, it was just such a neat feeling to be there when somebody's having such a bad day and to know that you made a difference. So I fell in love with it, and it's been my career, and this is going on my 40th year. So been doing it for quite some time.
Yeah. If somebody wanted to become a firefighter, what would they need to do?
Yeah, so today, a person to be hired in our department, and most of the metro departments, has to already be certified as a firefighter and certified as an EMT basic. Different levels of EMT basic, intermediate, and paramedic have to be at least a basic. I tell you, I think the future is probably going to see that change because the candidate pool is very shallow. There's just not a lot of people that have those certifications. The reason it used to work so well when we were all paid on call or volunteer departments, we'd bring those people on, provide the training so that they could get everything they need. They served us as volunteers. Then when somebody had an opening for a career position, they may go for that and become a career firefighter. But most of us have migrated away from volunteer because it's just not an effective system here in the metro where people are working during the day, for various reasons, but just not available enough. So that there are not a lot of people getting that training to become a firefighter and an EMT until they get hired. So the pool is much shallower than it used to be. I know DMAC has started a program where they'll provide firefighter and all the way up to paramedic if that's what you want to do in a 2-year program. And so hopefully that will help refresh some of the candidate pool. But I still anticipate that a guy in high school or gal is thinking about doing something. They're not going to have the opportunity to get that training until they're able to get hired and do that.
Awesome. So how many people, how many crew members are on staff with the Urbandale Fire Department in the firefighter, medic, driver, engineer, lieutenant, captain
Sure.
roles? How many total crew members are there?
So there's 54 people that are career firefighters in our department, and that would be line people. So 18 people a day, 6 at each of our 3 stations. So we have those. Then we have some command staff. In addition to that, myself, 2 other assistant chiefs, a fire marshal, and we still have a few part-time people, but we're no longer hiring part-time people. But we will continue to have our part-time as long as they're with our department. But again, if I go back into 1998 when I was hired, there were about 60 volunteers or paid on call. And the difference between a volunteer and a paid on call is volunteers doing it, they typically don't get any money. A paid on call usually gets paid to do training, gets paid to go on calls and that sort of thing, as a way to try to encourage people to do it. So back in the day we had 60, but over a period of time we've gotten a smaller number.
So I was doing a little research, and Urbandale Fire Department started in like 1917. There was a Model T truck. There was a 26 Dodge, old pumper truck, stuff like that. Is there a place people can go here locally to see the old Urbandale Fire Department equipment?
No, unfortunately, over the years that stuff went away. So there's not a lot of historical items in our department, but you can travel into Metro and see some of that.
Sure.
Ankeny has an antique truck at their central station that you can see what those trucks were like. But unfortunately, sometimes people embrace history and make sure they keep some of that stuff. Our history is we didn't keep a lot of that stuff, so we don't have a lot of old trucks. Even today, when it's time to replace the truck, we sell it or trade it in, depending on what the case may be. So we don't keep them hanging around. But it is really cool to go looking back at the old stuff and how they did it. And I enjoy going to other places and seeing, a steamer truck, that's oh my gosh, so many years old. And it's kind of hard to imagine how they did some of the things. In fact, the department I came from, it went all the way back to the days when they had running companies and firefighters wore, to me it looks like a bathing suit, but it was running suits because they'd run everywhere that they went, and they had horses to pull the steam engine to get there that would pump the water and stuff. And it's like, man, we've come a long ways, and the fire service has come a long ways. It's been a neat ride.
Is the station over on Douglas the first one from Urbandale that's still standing?
Yes, so that one was built in 1975. Prior to that, there was the station was actually on 70th Street, just a little bit to the east of where it's at today. So it's our oldest station. We have it in the capital improvement program to be replaced at some point in the future. It's not programmed yet, but it was built for a volunteer department. So as we developed and grew into a career department, there wasn't a place for people to sleep, stay overnight, and those sort of things. So we had to make do for a while. Then we renovated that station so that it would accommodate people that could sleep at the station and accommodate what we do today compared to what they did back in the olden days. But that station is pretty much getting to the end of its life. It's a metal building. It's not truly a modern fire station like this one is, or our newest station. And this one was built in 1996 and opened in 97. So it was still built with the idea that it was volunteers that were coming to the station. There weren't people in the station 24 hours a day. In fact, when I started here, there wasn't a lot of Western Urbandale even developed. And, there were days I felt like the Maytag repairman. I was out here, I wouldn't see anybody all day long, except for responding to calls and such. So we've come a long way, but that's our oldest station.
So we'll shift gears a little bit. I want to ask because, well, for a couple of reasons, I'm going to put some pretty cool videos that I found, some stock footage over the top of some of this.
Sure.
And one of them is kind of kicking down flaming doors and going into a fire. So could you kind of describe to me an experience you had actually fighting a fire? I'm not asking you to go into any negative
Sure.
memories or anything like that, but maybe a time you had fun busting down a door.
Absolutely. There's so many of those. And what a firefighter might consider fun, people are like, "What? Are you out of your mind running into a building that's on fire?" But if you're into those things, it's rewarding to be able to fight fire. Urbandale's fortunate; we don't have a fire problem. Now, one fire is one fire too many. Don't get me wrong. But the community I came from, which was much smaller, had a fire problem. It'd be nothing to have 30 fires in a year, 35 fires in a year down there. In Urbandale, we probably average from 8 to 15 a year. Last year was 7 that were structure fires that would, require a bigger structure fire. It's something that would require pulling hose and additional firefighters too. But I think back, most of my firefighting was back before I came the fire chief. So now I'm more in command. I'm outside. I don't get to do the fun stuff. So, of course, when it's 100 degrees outside, it's not so much fun. But where I come from, it was always hot like that. But I mean, just think of so many fires where we were a very aggressive fire department. In fact, recklessly aggressive at that time, because that's the way we'd always done it. The people who had always done it taught us, we taught others, and we kept doing it the way we'd always done it. And it took a while before we got smarter and said, sometimes it doesn't make sense to risk your life when there's nothing to save, a house that's already consumed down. Well, when I started in the business, we'd go in that house the same as if you said somebody's in there, or if you told us nobody was in there. It didn't change anything. We went in there aggressively fighting fire, risking our lives, to taking chances that we probably shouldn't have taken. But it was awesome. As a firefighter who enjoyed fighting fire, you're in a room, and TV is what done our career more harm than good, because the public sees Chicago Fire or Backdraft or any fire shows, and they think, well, that's what fighting fire is like, and it's not. And I will tell you that the one that I will share with you is a mobile home fire, which is not very big, right? I mean, it's maybe 14 by 80 feet long. And it was in the middle of the day, nobody's home, and fire is blowing out of the back window. I mean, the flame is not just coming out, it's blowing out like a torch. But because we were an aggressive department, we opened the front door and we go in and put it out from the inside. That's the way we did it. I would tell you today, we'd go out and put water from the outside. Way smarter, way less risk for us. But I opened that door to go into that mobile home, and if you wanted to know what it was like with me, I'd just tell you to close your eyes. It's pitch black, and I put my hand on my face piece, and I cannot even see my hand. I have to be on my hands and knees because it is so hot in there that later we'll see that everything that was hanging up, curtains, pictures, all the way at the far end of the trailer, far end from the fire, has melted and fallen off the walls. Now, we know the layout of the trailers. One side or the other is going to be the hallway, and it's going to take us back to the bedroom. So my partner and I are crawling through the smoke and heat. Can't see anything. You're doing everything by feel in a building you've never been in. Fortunately, it's a small one. And we find a hallway, and we start crawling down to the hallway. And it is so hot that now I'm not on my hands and knees. I'm crawling on my belly. I'm as flat as I can be, and probably about 40 pounds less to me then as there is now. So I got as low as I could get, and we never, ever spray water on smoke. Water on smoke doesn't do anything. But I was so close, it was so hot. You're not sure where you're at. It's so hot that I have to open that nozzle, put some water. I got to cool it down. And when you open the nozzle, then all that heat turns to steam, and anywhere that you have any exposed skin is immediately entrenched with that steam that's going to burn. Essentially, the water that we released in that confined space puts the fire out in the back. We crawl back out of there, open the doors and windows so that we can ventilate that area. Now I'm outside, I can see again. I take my air pack off, and everywhere my air pack was, my turnout gear is like it's brand new, but everywhere else is burned. It's that hot. Way too much of a risk, because if there was a person in there, there's no way anybody other than what we had on could have survived that. But you know what? We got out, and I ended up having to get new turnout gear because you burnt your gear. And we're thinking, we come out, we're smoking. It's that hot. You're off-gassing. Your gear is smoking from being in there. And the whole time is like having your eyes closed. You can see nothing. And it's so different than what it is on TV, where a person has their jacket open and they don't have a face piece on. You couldn't have took a step in that place without that. If you'd have walked in there without that, you would have died instantly. One breath. It was that hot. Over 140 degrees will damage your lungs. Well, I guarantee you that my helmet was probably in 400 degree temperatures at the very least. At the ceiling, it was probably close to 1,000 degrees, just getting ready to flash. And if we hadn't intervened, if we'd just let nature take its course, that would be the next thing that happens. All that black smoke is just fuel, just needs enough oxygen. As soon as it gets enough oxygen, it ignites. Now everything from the front to the back, side to side, is on fire inside. And that's why people see fires and they're like, well, just go in and rescue them. It just doesn't work that way. Fires aren't anything like they are on TV. They're terrible. I mean, it's like a breathing thing that's trying to find a way out and find a way to consume more. And everything it does, if we're at your house, is damaging the stuff that you love. Everything on the walls are damaged. And so even now, a small fire can do such extensive damage. And one of the new homes, probably been about 8 years ago now, we had a candle knocked over and it burnt a recliner and one cushion on the couch. So I want you to picture that in your mind. That's a pretty minor fire. But modern home designs is everything is open. So it used to be if that was in the kitchen fire and the door was closed to the kitchen, it's confined pretty much to the kitchen. You may have smoke throughout the rest of the house. This house was totaled out by that small amount of fuel. And I think a lot of it has to do with what's burning today compared to what was burning when I first started. Most things were man-made. They weren't synthetics. Well, now it's all plastics, and that type of fuel is like having gasoline in there. When it burns so much hotter, it burns so much faster. And that house in Urbandale was like over a $300,000 fire loss from a recliner and one cushion on the couch. That would never happen when I started in the fire service. Never, not even close. In fact, back then you'd have about 20 minutes to get out of a house from the time the fire starts till it flashes over, as I described to you. Today you have about 3 minutes to get out of a house. So things have changed dramatically. But fortunately we don't have that many fires. But we're like the football team that's always training but doesn't always have a game. And because you don't have that many, some people get complacent and say, well, we're not going to have a fire. Well, when you do have that one, you have to be willing to risk a lot to save a lot. If somebody says somebody's in there and it's a survivable incident, we're going to commit our people to a situation that they could lose their lives in that's that bad. If there's a life to save, we believe there's a life to save. If somebody tells us everybody's out, then we take a little less risk. We'll risk a little to save property. We'll risk a lot to save lives, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that. That was an awesome story and a very detailed explanation afterwards as well. If you could expand on that briefly, what should people know in the case they have a fire? What should somebody try to put something small out by themselves? Should they can you kind of go into some details about
Sure.
how quickly somebody needs to call you, what their process should be?
Yeah, I'll answer that in two parts for you. I'm going to back up and say, let's talk about before they have the fire. Because I think fires, everybody's fighting. And the problem that we have in our country is that people don't think it's going to happen to them. Whether you're talking about fire, a fall at home that you end up needing to call an ambulance, an active shooter situation, everybody thinks that happens somewhere else. But all the people that it happens to were thinking the same way. So I think when people think these things can happen to me, then they're a little bit more careful about the things that they do, because most of the fires that we deal with are because somebody does something that they weren't thinking. Leaving a candle where it can be knocked over, leaving a candle close to a Christmas tree, multiple extension cords, things that just aren't smart things to do. But if you don't think nothing ever bad's going to happen, then you don't think about those things, if that makes sense to you. So even no matter how smart you are, things happen and fires occur. Typically the two things that cause the most fires are cooking and heating. So again, where I come from, it doesn't get cold like it does here, so people aren't as well adapted to dealing with that. In 1983, it got down to 6 degrees down there. It's the coldest I've ever seen it in my life. I don't think I'd ever seen it below 17 before. It got down to 6 degrees. I think we had like 24 house fires in a 24-hour period. A lot of that was those old electric heaters that are built into the wall that nobody ever used. In fact, they have moved a dresser in front of it Now it got cold enough to come on and it catches the dresser on fire. Those type of things. So just people not thinking about fire safety. Our advice is always to call immediately. You know, most people know all about putting a lid on a pan, right? So you got grease on fire, you put a lid on it. That's the best way to put it out. Turn the stove off if you can do it. Most people know that, but most people will also panic when they look over there and the pan's on fire. And the thought that seems to go through everybody's minds, if I can get this out of my house, then it's a less problem. But you and I know, and they just don't think straight when they're panicking, is if you pick up that pan that's on fire and start toward your door, you're not going to walk very smoothly. What's happening to that grease that's on fire? It's sloshing everywhere. And as soon as it sloshes on your hand and burns you, you let go. Now you have a bigger fire in your house that's probably going to be well out of control by the time the fire department gets there. We have a pretty good response time. We make 90% of our calls, we're on scene in less than 8 minutes, which is pretty good. But 8 minutes in free burning stage can totally wreck a house. I mean, it's just amazing the damage that can be done. So, you know, think smart, have somebody call 911. The quicker, the better. Even if you think, I think I'll be able to put this out and probably won't need them, I'd rather you call us 100 times and we get there and say, no, I don't. You don't need any help from us, although we might help you be able to clean up from some of that. Than to sit there and say, well, I don't want to bother those guys. That's what they're here for. That's what our whole mission is. So call early, call often, don't hesitate to do that. We don't charge for fires, so some people are like, well, I know that's going to cost me. There's no cost. Your taxes pay for the fire department. The only time that we do charge is for EMS calls, because the taxes support our organization to be ready to respond, but then anytime we do, that's a very costly response. So we do charge for that, but never a charge for any other emergency.
Excellent. So 2 more, and then I guess I'll ask you a couple of questions from some kids that I asked everybody else
Sure.
as well after that. But 2 more. You just said there our purpose. So I want to give you an opportunity to talk about real fast what the purpose of the fire department is. And I know you have some core values.
Sure.
So if you could tell me what those core values are. You don't have to go into details on all of them, but if you could tell me what they are with a slight pause in between, and then tell me which one of them stands out the most to you and why.
Okay.
And then I'll ask you a couple of kids questions after.
Okay. We'll start with our mission is to preserve life, protect property, and promote safety through education. And it's written that way because safety through education is, if we can teach people safe habits, then we avoid some of the response stuff. So if you don't have a fire, then your property doesn't get damaged, your people don't get injured, that sort of thing. So I think that's an important part of what we do. So we teach fire extinguishers. Anybody in the community wants to know those, we'll put a class on. We teach CPR, first aid, stop the bleed, all these things that are responsive to something happening, but that will reduce the impact on a person. So that's what we focus on. Our core values are pride, respect, integrity, duty, unity, and honesty. And to me, the most important one of those is integrity. That's my personal values as well. I am going to do the right thing, what I believe to be the right thing, whether you're there to see me do it or not. And I know our people embrace that, and they do that. They do the right thing, and we try to teach them. You know, if you're not sure what to do, is it right for the customer? Is it safe? Is it legal? If it is, do it. Just do it, and we'll worry about the aftermath afterwards. But you're being guided by what helps you be a person of integrity. If I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, or I'm going to die trying to do it. You know, I see so many people that will tell you one thing and do another, or commit to this but still not do the same thing. I think that integrity is what separates myself anyway, and what I believe is the people that are on this department. They're going to do everything they can to do the right thing no matter what. And you should be able to count on that, right? We're coming to a home. I've never met you before, and you have a 2-year-old. You've never met me. You don't know anything about me. You will hand me that 2-year-old. If that 2-year-old's choking, having a medical emergency, whatever it is, you don't get to check my references. You don't get to know what kind of person I am. You have to know that you could hand that baby to me, and we're going to do the right thing for your child or your spouse or your whomever. And I think that's just such an important part of it, that people trust us so much. There was several years where the firefighter was the most trusted position in the country. I think now it's nurses, if I'm not mistaken, but it just says a lot. I come into your house, it's on fire. Well, you didn't plan to have your house on fire, so you don't have your possessions put up. Maybe you have some money on a desk or other valuable stuff, whatever it may be. I guarantee you, when Urbandale Fire Department leaves there, it's going to be in the same place. Or if it's been moved, we're going to tell you what we did with it, so that we did it to protect it for you. But there wouldn't have to be a time where you'd say, "Hey, I'm missing something after the fire department got here." We try to do all we can to hire the right people, so that we hire people that you could be $1,000 on your desk, and it's at night, and it could have been consumed in the fire, but that's not the way it works. It's $1,000 on your desk. We find it, you're going to have $1,000. You can count on that. There's not going to be $950. There's going to be whatever there was, and that's all about integrity.
I really got a sense of that when I was here Saturday, speaking to everybody, and how the core values, they all really showed that to me here and spoke about that during our time together. And one of the great examples that they had to roll that all in together is one of the firefighters was telling me a story about a woman who got in a fender bender and had to go in the ambulance to the hospital, but she had just grocery shopped, right? And they took her $100 and however many dollars of groceries, and they brought them here and put them in the fridges here for her for when she got done.
Right.
And that rolls a bunch of those into the service that was provided in that particular instance.
Tons of stories like that, and that's that extra stuff that not every department in the country does that. Some of them, that's not my responsibility, but from the person that's providing it in Urbandale, it is our responsibility. Why should we let them spoil their groceries? And it's not like we're taking them out of service. If there's another emergency, guess what? Your groceries are going on an emergency call with us. It's just a matter of making sure that we take care of everything that we can. So we've got tons of those stories. And what's so valuable to me is they don't come back and say, "Hey, here's what we did." I often don't find out about them, sometimes for months later, when I get a thank you note. Somebody said, "Hey, they did this," and I'm like, "Wow, they never even told me," which is extra special to me, because some people do things so they are noticed doing those things. But when you're doing it and you really hope nobody even finds out you did it, you're doing it for the right reason.
I couldn't agree more. And I love that. I love that about the people here. And thank you for sharing that as well. So I'll just ask a couple of quick questions that were sent to me or given to me by some kids in that I know.
Sure.
The first one was, and I've asked everybody this, I think, is, do you have a Dalmatian?
I don't. We don't have any pets at the fire stations, but I know that Windsor Heights does have a Dalmatian. And of course, if you know the story about Dalmatians, back in the day when the horses were around, the Dalmatians were going on calls with the fire department because they kept other animals away from the horses, and that's the way the Dalmatian became associated with the fire department. I am a dog lover, so I do have dogs, but I don't have a Dalmatian.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. Are you a football fan? And who is your favorite team or teams, college or pro?
Yep, I am a football fan. I am a college football fan is my thing. I live for college football. Being from the state of Alabama, you're either for Alabama or Auburn. And I hate Alabama, so I'm an Auburn fan. My daughter's an Auburn graduate. And if you remember several years ago, the kick six game where it was the last play of the game and they missed a field goal and it was returned for a touchdown. I was at that game. It was my daughter's last game, so it was I get chills just thinking about it. In fact, we were going to leave after that game and drive home, spend the night halfway, but I was so bummed up that night. I drove all the way from Auburn, Alabama, all the way to Urbandale without sleep or a rest or anything. And every time I'd start to get a little sleepy, I'd just change the station and somebody'd be talking about that play and I'd just get all fired up again. So, yeah, that's college football is really big at our house. Of course, I like the in-state teams as well, but wasn't associated with them until I moved here. Have an affinity for Iowa State. Kind of see them as the little brother, if you will, and I don't know, always pull for the little guy.
Kind of got the same colors as your patch too.
Yeah.
If you, I suppose. Go Hawks. What did I say if for Auburn? What's the
War Eagle.
War
Yeah.
Eagle. Okay. And then last question. And I pose this to more than one child asked me this, but I'm going to pose it to you.
Sure.
Can you take me for a ride in your fire truck?
You know, occasionally we will do a contest, and we haven't done it in a while, where we'll send out to the schools a coloring contest or something. Typically, we used to do this during Fire Prevention Week, and then we would choose a couple winners from that contest, and then we'd take them to school in a fire truck, pick them up at home, take them to school. So we look for opportunities to do those kind of things. And then we have a ride-along program, but it's typically for adults, not for children, where they could actually come and ride and go on calls with us for a period of time. There's some guidelines they have to meet to be able to do that. But yeah, we in a risk reduction mindset, you try to keep people from being in a situation where they could be hurt while we're doing something. But at the same time, taking a kid to school, I had people complain about this. Oh, you're wasting fuel. You're wasting taxpayer money. And I'm like, no, we're out driving the streets. That's good for our people to be familiar, because when we go to 123 Smith Street to pick you up, that could be 123 Smith Street on a call. We're driving there like we got to figure out where we're going, how we're going to get there, how we're going to go from there to the school, those type of things. So it's a win-win. I never had a kid that said, oh my gosh, that was a terrible ride on a fire truck. Because quite frankly, they all look at a fire truck anyway, right? I mean, even adults, fire truck rides by, most people are looking at it and want to see it. If I had my way, we'd look like NASCAR. We'd have stuff all over the sides of them, but the city doesn't see it that way. But, people just love to see a fire truck.
I tell you, we do in my household. My 4-year-old is absolutely infatuated with them. And he is even more so now that I've started showing him some of the stuff that I've been doing with you guys. So,
well, why we can't let them ride as a child, they can visit any of our stations and climb up in a fire truck and get their picture behind the steering wheel of the fire truck. Look at anything that they want to look at. We encourage them to do that so that they can see what it's all about.
Awesome. Well, I have held you far too long, I believe. We're at 30 minutes, and
Wow.
that's a lot crazier than I expected. I didn't think that was going to happen. Chief Holt, I appreciate you very much. Really respect you.